Hello and welcome to the November 2023 edition of Prairie Vistas. I'm Education Services Manager Tim Wollenzine.
And I'm Education Services Associate Nick Lero.
Nick, what educational resources are we going to be looking at today?
Well, I thought it'd be a good time to take a look at youth journalism. I just wish there was a PBS-created entity like that.
Didn't you read the headlines this morning?
No, I didn't. What's going on?
Experts have found a place for all things youth journalism provided by PBS. PBS NewsHour Student Reporting Labs.
Well, that's cool, but what is that and what's so special about it?
Well, Student Reporting Labs is a hands-on student reporting training program which connects students and teachers to experts in the field of journalism, both in front of and behind the camera. It's also a resource hub with lessons, guides, and challenges for both students and teachers under the title Storymaker.
Well, that's interesting. Is it free, though?
Of course it is.
All of it?
You betcha.
Well, I better check this out. Where can I find this program?
StudentReportingLabs.org.
Gotcha. Let me just type this in and hit enter. This is what the PBS NewsHour Student Reporting Labs website looks like, studentreportinglabs.org. And if you want to take a look at what exactly it is students are doing when they're involved with Student Reporting Labs, you go to the Youth Reporting tab, and let's just check out a story. This is Rebuilding Life After Addiction. It comes to us from the Beaverton Academy of Science and Engineering in Oregon. And just like this, I'm not going to play it, but you can check this out for yourself. This is what students can create. This is just one possibility of a story that a student or students can make as part of this youth journalism program. So it even includes the station that was involved in creating that story, Oregon Public Broadcasting. If you want to get involved with Prairie Public, if you're in North Dakota, or potentially even northwestern Minnesota, give us a call, email us. We'd love to help get your students reporting on the news, give them some tips, some training, have them come visit the station, whatever it might be, contact us. And if you want to get started, under participate, you can see there are two distinct sides to this. So you have the educator side of things and the student side of things. Now, it's a focus of Student Reporting Labs that a lot of things are student-led, which is a good thing because they're going to be a professional journalist. They got to be out there doing it themselves. So a lot of this is going to come back to exploring Storymaker, and we'll look at that in a second. But the best way, of course, to get in contact with the people at Student Reporting Labs is to fill out just the simple contact form. You can do that. You can also join their groups. They have a WhatsApp group. They have groups on other websites for both students and educators to get the latest information, contact each other, and the experts at Student Reporting Labs. So if we take a look at this Storymaker thing, this is really the resource and curriculum side of things. So a lot of these tabs, you end up at the resources area anyhow. So this is their resource library, and here you can find, as you can see, lessons and projects, toolkits for students to get started on things. So if you're just starting your program, this would be a great way to get students going on something that's professionally made, vetted, and it's easy to get in contact with them, see how things are going, check progress, and really come out on the other side with something professional looking and sounding. And if you ever need a tutorial on something quick, the tutorials tab, I thought I'd point this out because this is a really well done set of videos they have. If you need to do something, you need to know how to do something quick, you've got all of these great things. You've got things you might not ever think of, like B-roll, audio tips, task cam recording. I mean, you name it, it's right here. You can even do things in the podcast format. So that's Student Reporting Labs and Storymaker. And again, if you want to get in contact with us, we'd love to help you out. Put your students on the news. The next segment is made up of interviews I conducted with 3 newspaper advisors at high schools in both Fargo and Bismarck, North Dakota. They will detail how their programs work, what they do to make their program successful, and give advice on what you can do if you're thinking of starting your own newspaper club at school. Joining me now are 3 high school newspaper advisors, 2 of which are from Fargo, while the other is from Bismarck. Who do I have the pleasure of interviewing today?
My name is Nick Hornbacher. I teach English and journalism at Legacy High School in Bismarck, North Dakota. I'm the advisor for the school newspaper and yearbook.
Stephanie Livingston. I teach English at Fargo North High School.
Rebecca Johnson, Fargo South High School.
My first question is, how did you begin your involvement with your school's newspaper club? Was it already in place, or did you have to start it yourself? And if so, tell us about that process.
Yeah, so the cool thing about Bismarck Public Schools is that our newspaper isn't even a club, it's actually a class. So students are getting an English elective credit for it that counts towards graduation. Ended up taking a long-term sub job where I was the substitute teacher for about 2.5 months for newspaper, lit mag, and yearbook. Really enjoyed it. And during that time, the advisor for all three of those here at Legacy High School texted me and said, "Hey, I'm retiring at the end of this year. And just so you know, that position will be open." So I applied for it and ended up getting the spot. And now I really love it.
So the Sedian is the name of the Fargo South newspaper, and it was already in place when I got my job here. And it's been in place for, I don't have the exact number, but years. It's been a long-standing history of Fargo South.
I took over the journalism class and club 10 years ago when the previous advisor teacher retired. It was happenstance, kind of. I was the only one licensed to teach journalism. Once the former advisor retired, you have to have a few extra credits and a credential to have it put on your license. And so,
How do you retain students in your club? What does maintaining a steady stream of students entail?
Oh, that's the game, right? That's the hard part. I try to identify students who want the extra challenge, especially as they're younger. 9th, 10th grade, I do have the privilege of teaching an intro to journalism class. So throughout that, I help guide the students who show some type of really good ability with photography or interviewing or something to guide towards the upper level class, that yearbook or newspaper class that will suit them best. And then when it comes to retaining students, I think that's just really comes down to what the classroom experience is for the kids. I don't want to sound like I'm bragging or anything, but I think if you ask most of my, especially juniors or seniors that have been with me for a few years, their favorite class to be in is the publication room. That's because they have voice and choice over what they do. They feel comfortable here. They get to express their creativity and push themselves, but in a place that's safe. Like even, for example, on Wednesdays, our class starts at 10:50 and goes on till noon, but the entire class, save maybe one or two that have scheduling, they're here at 10:30 and they're working because they just want to be.
Retaining them, I think students, they enjoy being part of the community that we have. And so some of the really good ones, if they can't sign up for the course again, they will often offer to freelance.
I teach the honors English for sophomores, and so ideally I recruit as many of the kids from there as I can, because I know them and I know their skills or strengths as writers, but it can be really hard to convince those kids to take the course because there's so little, they feel like there's so little time in their school day. Right now I had great retention from last year. I think I have 8 returning students, and that's the most I've ever had, and it was a dream. Otherwise it is really hard. You're starting so fresh every single year, teaching the kids the same thing every single year in the different programs that we use.
What are some typical stories your students cover? Which is more typical, you giving students assigned stories or students making their own stories?
98%, if not maybe even more, they're deciding. And I'm thinking between yearbook and newspaper here both. Like we had our planning day today for our December issue of Uncut, and I pitched no ideas. I just sat back and let them talk. I helped them bounce ideas around, like to help focus things, but all the content is totally student driven. I don't assign stories. If I hear about something, I'll be like, hey, this is going on. Maybe somebody should look into this. But all the content that is created for the newspaper, it's all students paying attention to things. It's fully student driven. They decide the content, they decide the stories, and that really gives them a really heavy level of investment in the work.
So our newspaper comes out once a month, and we always start out the month by brainstorming. And our big thing that we want to do is to relate the stories back to Fargo South and how the information can connect to our students. So we always begin by looking at, well, what's going on in our school, and then we might look at a bigger picture with the district and the community. But with the community, we have to ask ourselves, is this relevant and timely to students in our school?
It's pretty rare that I assign stories to students. This year especially, the students have generated so many of their own story ideas and gone right in with drafting those stories. We brainstorm together and we look at the holes that exist. My goal always is to have lots of coverage of our students and our student body here, and so encouraging them to write features on different students, clubs, sports, activities. More often, the editor-in-chief of our student paper guides students, or she'll sometimes assign stories, specific stories that she wants run, because it is, student journalism. I just advise, I make sure that they're adhering to the First Amendment and our ethics as journalists, and then otherwise most of the stories are up to them. Sometimes I'll pitch them. We use Snowflow, which is a web program from Snow Sites, a company in Minnesota that caters specifically to high school and college journalism. And sometimes I'll pitch story ideas in there that I'd like to see written, but if a kid doesn't volunteer for it, it just sits there.
What does a newspaper club need to have or do in order to be successful?
I think the first thing is student leaders that care. As I said, it's so student driven, and finding those students that can step up and be student leaders is crucial. Like I gave a presentation even on this a few weeks ago when we were in Boston for that convention about leadership and the things that it takes to be a good leader. And it was a mixture of applying to advisors like myself and students, but finding those students, whether they're seniors or freshmen, that exhibit the qualities of good leadership, that care about the work, because all the little things like knowing the correct AP style, figuring out lighting for photography, designing pages, all of that stuff can happen fairly organically if you have students that care. And if the students that are setting the tone, that are setting the expectations and kind of the vibe, if you will, for the class, if they care about the work, if they are really invested in it, and they're like good leaders, they know what they're doing, all those things will follow.
We need to work together as a team. We need to communicate well with one another when it comes to our work and our deadlines. The students all write stories, but then they also copy edit the stories. And so if things aren't turned in on time, then the copy editor doesn't get the work read, and then it ultimately brings layout. So everything is, it works together. So they really need to have effective communication and effort together, because it is a class. They have to be here. They have to work cohesively.
They need students that are willing to get, work done. They need a budget. Right now we're struggling with that here at North. We're not sure that we're going to be able to continue with any paper printing, which is really a sad situation. Hard for the students to find the motivation when they're not sure if what they're working so hard to create will get printed anymore. Those are the two main things, I think. Making sure there's budget money for them to work with, and then students that have that drive to get things done.
What tools and or resources do students use in the journalistic process?
Well, one of the tools that we use is we use Adobe for everything for newspaper. Yearbook is through Jostens, and they have their own online, like, more user-friendly version of InDesign, basically. But when we are creating on the digital design side, I do like to use the industry standard, which is the Adobe package. So I've got a few students who are, I would say, fluent in InDesign. The especially my editor-in-chief, like she could get a job as a graphic designer easily with the amount of work that she puts in on InDesign. We play around with Photoshop. I teach them good photography skills. So we have our set of Canon Rebel cameras and we talk through how to use those and how to use our tools well on that end. With the amount of online things, I can't even think about how many different videos from professionals on interviewing or little tips that I found here and there, style books on things. On our Google Classroom, we have lists and lists of resources. Some of them I've created, some of them I've gotten from other advisors at these conventions that I've gone to, which have been really helpful. And a lot of it's just this organic, like find this resource, grab this one here and there all over the place, and put together anything. And all those resources probably come from problem solving. We find a problem, we don't know how to do it, and we find something to fix that solution. So I can't really say I have a set curriculum or anything like that, because we definitely don't. It's more of like, hey, here's where we want to end up. How do we get to that point? What do we need? And when we hit those roadblocks or we figure that we don't know how to do something, we figure it out together.
We use the Adobe Creative Cloud platform, so we use InDesign to create our school newspaper, which can be a learning curve, because it's not just you sign up for journalism, you're writing stories, so you're also expected to lay out the stories. You're expected to take pictures, so learning how to use a camera. So we do lean on our other experts in our school. We have teachers who teach photography. We have teachers who teach graphic design. So we can go to those teachers and ask for their help, for their input, to be able to utilize the layouts and information like that.
It's made it a lot easier now that we're using the snow sites, the SnowFlow workflow program that connects directly to our website. And so students pitch stories right in there, and then they can submit to editors, and then submit to me. And so it just makes it really easy for students to get feedback on those stories from at least 3 people in the class before it runs. And so then we know we're running hopefully better quality stories.
Last question. If you could give one piece of advice to a newspaper advisor who's just starting out, what would you say?
I honestly might go back to the thing about the retaining students and find the right kids. And maybe to expand on that, maybe it would be like set the tone how you want it to be. I remember my first year, I had a group of students that I inherited. They've long since graduated, so I think I can talk about this now, where they wanted to be there to put their friends in the yearbook. They didn't have the right intentions. They didn't have the right desire. And setting that expectation of I have a higher standard than that, and I think we can do better, and not being afraid to do that. I lost a lot of people that semester. Half of them quit on me, but that turned out to be the best thing possible because the students who filled those spots shared the same values. So it's finding the right people who have the right vision. And it doesn't need to be the exact same vision as a leader. Like I argue with my students a lot about things, and that's good. Like we have those discussions just like a real newsroom would about how we should handle different things. But finding the people that care, finding the people that value the work, and finding the students who are willing to go through that struggle with the same positive intention in the end. If you do that, everything else falls into place eventually.
I would say, don't be afraid, because I came in here and I did not have background in newspapers. My background for media was in multimedia, so in film, and I learned a lot, and I actually learned a lot from the students. So a lot of the creative outlets, it does not have to be from the teacher. It is that team aspect, and everybody's ideas can come together to create a great product.
Have fun. Learn with your students. You don't need to be an expert in all parts of it, but you need to show them, to model the learning process. I never used Photoshop or InDesign before I took over the program, and there's still not a lot of things that I can do, but I can help them troubleshoot and try. I think building a good relationship with your admin and anyone higher up who can help you navigate some of the logistics of what your newspaper will need would be really helpful when you're just starting out as well.
That's all I've got. Nicholas Hornbacher, Rebecca Johnson, and Stephanie Livingston, thank you. You can find all 3 of their student publications online. Uncut News Magazine for Legacy High School in Bismarck, The Sudayan for Fargo South High School, and The Scroll for Fargo North High School.
Finally, Nick has interviewed Prairie Public's own Dave Thompson. Dave Thompson has been on the air from Prairie Public Studio in Bismarck for over 40 years, delivering the news to the people of North Dakota with award-winning expertise and candor. Dave speaks on how he began, like many others in his shoes did, climbing his way to the top, all the while picking up invaluable pieces of advice along the way.
I'm here with Dave Thompson, Prairie Public's news director. Hello, Dave.
Hi, Nick. How are you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
Good, good.
Dave, where did your interest in journalism come from?
I will tell you the story. Basically, I've been interested in radio since I was about 6 years old. I received a transistor radio for a Christmas present. And then I turned it on, and there was certain magic to it, magic for radio. So I wanted to get into radio. So I got to college at UND, and I went into the communications programs. But we had a flood up there, 77, 78. And I was assigned to work the Friday night shift on flood. And one of my things was that I had to do was call the mayor of East Grand Forks, a guy by the name of Louis Murray. So I called him and I said, it's okay if I record, so I recorded. And then I just asked him the question, what's an update about what's going on with the flood? And he told me he was calling out, he was asking that the National Guard be called out. And then I wrote the story, sent it to the Associated Press. The story went nationwide, that the mayor of East Grand Forks was asking the governor of Minnesota to call the National Guard because there was concern about that. And it was almost like hooking a fish. I said, this is where I want to be, because I think I can do some things because I'm curious. I'm naturally curious and want to do a good job of informing people.
Before that, in like maybe junior high or high school, did you do anything like newspaper or yearbook or anything like that?
We did not have a newspaper. We did have a yearbook, but I didn't have the time because I was in choir and some other activities. But I will also tell you that I would go to basketball games and I would do pretend play-by-play. And everybody who knew me from my grade school and high school classes knows I was headed toward radio. So that was a big thing.
Okay, so then when you got to college, then that's where a lot of your training came from?
Right, and also, I should tell you this, the first time I appeared on air at our campus radio station, KFJM, I did what was called the night report. So I had to put the newscast together. And the bosses seemed to think I did an okay job, so I started thinking that's where I should take my career, is go toward the news side. So I started taking some journalism classes. I started taking some writing classes. I talked to the full-time journalists we had on station staff, and how to write a story, how to write a very good story that's easy to understand. Remember, in radio, you're competing with a lot of things, because in television, it takes you to sit down in front of the screen. In radio, you're competing with the sound of the tires if you're listening in your car, or the sound of children as you're trying to get them ready for school or give them cereal, that type of thing. So what you have to do is write very clearly, very simple language, and tell the story as best you can.
So working at this radio station in college, what happens afterward?
Okay.
The rest of your career as a professional journalist?
Well, here's what happened. I got a job offer to come back. I'm a Bismarck native. I got a job offer to come back to Bismarck at a station which was called KBOM. It was a 1,000-watt AM station, and it was being taken by some new owners, and they wanted to start a news department again. So they hired me, fresh out of college, to start a news department. And so what I did was took the job, and then for about a month, I was getting used to, writing things on deadline, because we did have hourly deadlines. And also working with some of my professors at UND just to say, this is what I'm doing. Could you look at some copy? am I doing some things right? And then that was my introduction. They could correct the copy, and I always took it as constructive criticism. So I think I honed my skills in writing in those first 18 months where I was at KBOM. After that, my second job was at another commercial station, KNOX, back in Grand Forks. So I've lived two places in my life, Bismarck and Grand Forks. KNOX, I was one of three people in the news department. And the news director had worked before I got to UND at the UND campus station. So he was well aware of what was available there, and he taught me a lot about observation. One thing that he said really stuck with me. He said, on your drive to work, you'll be able to find 5 stories if you keep your eyes open. And I've done that throughout my career. On my drive to work, maybe I can find 5 stories if I keep my eyes open. However, my drive's a lot shorter now. I only live 6 blocks from Prairie Public in Bismarck.
There you go. How did you end up at Prairie Public then?
Well, I knew that the public station, I saw that they were going to start a public station in Bismarck. And I really enjoyed my experience at UND, which was public. We had NPR, we had All Things Considered, but they had already gone into morning edition and things like that. And I actually interviewed with the soon-to-be station manager to be the operations manager. And she looked at my resume and said, would you consider working in the news department? I said, yes, I would. I really enjoyed doing news because I enjoy telling stories. And then she hired me as the news director. And what she did was she gave me enough rope to do the job that I needed to do. And I really appreciated that and would offer constructive criticism if something went wrong. But when it comes down to it, what we do in journalism, we're storytellers. We try to tell the right story. And we have a code here at Prairie Public. I know I'm going a little off field, but we have a code here at Prairie Public. I used to have a sign in my office that said, get it first right, but get it right first. There's so much pressure to become first with a story. I'd rather be right with a story than first with a story and have to go do corrections. And that's been my mantra here in the 40 plus years I've been here.
So from this now, we're looking at the past, now we're kind of looking at the future of journalism. And of course, there's a lot of questions. So if there's anything you could tell a young person interested in journalism, like a high schooler perhaps, what's something you would just want to tell them, some advice you've learned throughout your career?
When it comes down to basics for journalism, who, what, when, where, how, why, how, and getting the story right, it doesn't matter where you publish. It could be on radio, television, online, podcasts. We've got all sorts of places to publish now, but the basic job should remain the same. Don't worry about the platform. Worry about the story and the story accuracy. And writing it, so even if you're on a podcast or if you're online, you make it understandable in language that everybody can understand. And never try to convince your audience that you know more than they do, because you're kind of learning on the job too.
All right, Dave.
If
well,
you hadn't guessed, I love my job.
I actually did guess that. Okay, that was Dave Thompson, again, the news director at Prairie Public. Dave, thanks for the interview.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
And that's the sound of me shaking Dave's hand.
Well, that just about does it for this month's episode of Prairie Vistas. We hope that you've found some useful resources and inspiration in your own youth journalism ventures. Nick, what are we going to explore next month?
Next month, we'll be taking a look at Prairie Public's own series, Prairie Mosaic, a showcase of Upper Plains region arts, history, and culture. You can watch full episodes online at video.prairiepublic.org or on PBS LearningMedia, where you can find helpful classroom resources alongside episode clips.
Sounds great. Thank you to Dave Thompson, Nicholas Hornbacher, Rebecca Johnson, and Stephanie Livingston for their interviews. Thank you for listening. From Tim,
Nick,
and the rest of Prairie Public, have a cool and educational day. Learn something.